Hey, what is up guys, and welcome back to part 2 of my Elder Scrolls Settlement Wishlist, where we're going to be going over 5 more changes and additions that I'd like to see made to the settlement system if it's added into the next Elder Scrolls game. So for starters, let's go ahead and talk about decorations. In Fallout 4, without all the DLC and quite a few mods, you may have found the amount of decorations to be quite lacking. Unless, of course, you want to count miscellaneous items among that list. But even when it comes to those, I think we can all agree that they were a real pain to set up on tables and shelves. And that's just by hand. When it comes to using the settlement mode to move them, objects end up falling through floors or even disappearing. For the next Elder Scrolls game, it would be nice to have misc items, weapons, and armor that you could snap to shelves or tables. To make this work, there could be some sort of a grid system so that you could choose exactly where you want the object to end up. With this in mind, maybe the amount of grid spaces that an object takes up could determine whether or not it would fit on a certain shelf or display case. This way, all the cool items you've collected could actually be out in the open for you to enjoy looking at rather than tucked away in some old dusty drawer. When it comes to the type of decorations, I'm really hoping there are more available to the player than Fallout 4 offered. And I wouldn't mind having to unlock them either, possibly through a quest or by killing a creature, similar to the trophy system in Witcher 3. In a way, Fallout 4 got this part right, but let's not forget that it was locked behind DLC, along with armor stands, weapon racks, and display cases. As of now, we've really only gone over some of the small stuff, but there's a good reason for that. I picture it this way. Without the simple items like wanted posters, coin purses, banners, etc., you can still have these huge settlements, but they end up becoming very empty and all start to look the same after a while. And why would I want to spend time there when I could just make my home in a pre-existing town? So Bethesda, try not to skip out on the little stuff, and also try to include some larger interactive objects, like maybe some sort of a stage settlers could stand on to perform short skits or play music. Stuff like this could also play into settlers increasing their skills, similar to the Fallout shelter system. For instance, performing on stage or bartending could increase speechcraft, which they could then use to make your settlement more money. Or having some kind of a training yard with targets and dummies could help settlers increase their combat-focused skills, thus making them more prepared and effective later on should bandits arrive. As for decorations, I could really go on, so we'll leave it at that for now, but keep the settlers' skills in mind, because we'll get back into that when it comes to talking about workers for hire. Now, you may remember I mentioned making a home in a pre-existing town. In its simplest form, this could be something similar to the Breeze home in Whiterun, in the sense that it's already built and furnished. But what I'd love to see are empty houses available in each town or city. These could be small, however, sometimes players, including myself, don't want to make a whole new settlement from the ground up, but would rather focus on customizing a smaller area similar to the Red Rocket truck stop or home plate. Doing more of these small spaces and less large empty areas, like we saw in Fallout 4, could make room for more developer-made towns, which is something that I think a lot of players felt was lacking in Fallout 4. And don't get me wrong, I love building up my own personal town, but I also appreciate and respect the work Bethesda puts into its own towns, and I'd hate to end up seeing the settlements take the place of those. So I think having a better mix of larger empty areas and houses available in cities should help counteract the lack of pre-existing towns. Moving on, let's talk about workers for hire, and once again about how a settler skill system could be an interesting addition. I think overall, hireable settlers have many ways that they could factor into the settlements, but here's one of the main ways I see them making things a little more unique. As of now in Skyrim, you have the option to craft weapons and armor, and depending on your skill and equipment, you might be able to craft better weapons than a blacksmith sells. But what if you don't have the time to go through that process, but you do have the money. Well, imagine if you could just hire different blacksmiths for your settlement, with some costing more than others, but they'd also come with the skill set to be able to craft much better items. Obviously, like I mentioned earlier, a cheaper blacksmith could level up over time to become as good as the more expensive ones. You just have to have the patience and a fair amount of time for them to do so. This could add some much needed variety to vendors and could even become quite similar to The Witcher 3, in which there could also be very rare master weapon and armor smiths that the player could only unlock through completing a certain quest. And of course, this could go much further than the blacksmith. It could also be applied to traders, innkeepers, or hunters that would have to leave the settlement to bring back food or pelts. Imagine the possibilities this could lead to. For instance, maybe people like the hunter would end up getting captured or eaten more often if they were a lower level, thus leading to some more emotional encounters should you have to go rescue them or just end up stumbling across their dead body in the woods or near a cave. And not to mention with hireable bards or just more engaging NPCs in general, the settlements could really end up becoming a more lively place to visit than they were in Fallout 4. Next up is settlement lore. This is one more thing that I think Fallout 4 did alright on, at least for a few settlements. You had places like the Slog, which were made up of ghouls who had been exiled from Diamond City, or there was even Finch Farm, whose son had gone off to join a group of raiders, and a pretty unique group of raiders, I must say. I'd love to see stuff like this continued in the next Elder Scrolls, especially with the wide array of races and places different characters could have originated from. You could run into a camp of Khajiit who just barely survived a shipwreck, concluding their journey from elsewhere, maybe looking for a new home. Then following this encounter, maybe they could send you back to the now infested ship to gather some of their rare belongings. It's situations like these that add some much needed backstory to both the settlements and their people. It would also be nice to see settlements with distinct differences and advantages compared to other settlements to really help set them apart. For example, being located by a rich mine, river, or possibly a major trade route. And it's not just the land that has to provide these benefits either. It could also just be that since the settlement's made up of Khajiit, you'd end up making more money from skooma deals on the side, thus turning your entire settlement into one big drug front. And so lastly, we'll move on to natural settlement objects, or in Fallout 4's case, the lack thereof. Really, when it came to Fallout 4, all you had in terms of objects like natural vegetation were crops. There were no placeable trees or rocks, which is definitely something I'd like to see change in the next Elder Scrolls. Hell, even things like fallen trees or dead animals could be cool, and would allow the player to add a bit of their own story. For example, making it seem as though a harsh storm had just blown through. And when it comes to crafting these objects, I think that's where the real challenge lies, because they aren't man-made. But honestly, although it may not be too realistic, I'd say that just collecting wood, ore, and animal skins would suffice for the examples I gave. Though maybe there is a better alternative I just haven't come up with yet, like planting seeds or just ordering them from vendors. But anyways guys, that's gonna wrap things up for today. So hopefully you did enjoy this wish list, and at least most of the suggestions I had to give. And hopefully, maybe one day, Bethesda ends up seeing this. That being said, feel free to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.